Good evening. This is an informal meeting of the Gardner City Council on Monday, September 19th, 2022. I'd like to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilor Boone, Councilor Boudreaux, Councilor Craig Cormier, Councilor Ronald Cormier,
Present.
Councilor Denalowitz,
Present.
Councilor Harder,
Present.
Councilor Heath,
Present.
Councilor Mack,
Present.
Councilor Tyros, Councilor Walsh,
Present.
President Kaczynskis.
Present. For the public watching this evening, we are meeting informally tonight regarding agenda item number 10779, a notification from the mayor regarding the fire department operations audit. We voted to refer this item to the City Council as a committee of the whole during our last regular City Council meeting on September 7th, which is our purpose for meeting this evening. Since then, City councilors and the public have had the opportunity to review, ask questions, and gather information regarding the operations audit of the Gardner Fire and Ambulance Departments that was conducted by John Perro Consulting and Associates. A regular City Council meeting will follow this meeting at 7:30 p.m. this evening, which will give the City Council the opportunity to formally discuss the item and to vote on it. Retired Fire Chief John Perro of John Perro Consulting and Associates is here this evening to present the findings of the audit. Gardner Fire Chief Gregory Lagoy is here, and Mayor Nicholson have also joined us this evening as well. Chief Perro, the floor is yours.
Madam President, if I could just start off just as a means of background. Back in 2015, the city undertook a study by the Edward Collins Center of the University of Massachusetts, Boston, to determine whether or not it would be feasible for the City of Gardner's Fire Department to take on an ambulance system for a basic life service. Basic life support system here in Gardner. This is something that was done in 2015 before we went and created an ambulance system that we have here. The study that was done by the Collins Center was used as kind of the foundation for the report that retired Chief Perro is going to go through with you all here. And he'll basically be the one to lead the majority of the conversation. The report is the same as it was when it was first presented to the council back at the previous meeting. The question from the council back in the April time frame about conducting an audit like this was originally just about the ambulance system and if the ambulance system was feasible or not. We decided that while we were undertaking this to look at the department as a whole, so there's a little more in there. The report is pretty in-depth. I will say that since this is an audit, it's numbers-based and document-based, so there were no interviews conducted as a result of this. I was not interviewed, nor was the chief, nor was the auditor. It was just basically a review of the financial operations and the different policies of the department and how those compare with departments of our size, because it is an audit, not a study that would go for a more subjective view of things. This is rather just an objective overview of the department based on the data and facts and documents that we have with the department there. I know Chief will go over this in a little bit, but on page 8 you can see that we took in just over $1 million in fiscal year 2022 from the ambulance alone, which left the city with a $357,000 surplus for the fiscal year in the ambulance department in terms of revenue we took in for the city. But again, if you remember when we did the budget, the ambulance is budgeted separately than the fire department as a whole. That's because when we first took on the ambulance, we wanted to see how the financials of that particular department went, whereas the ambulance takes in enough revenue that we basically covers the full cost of 8 of our most newest hires in the fire department. Those are budgeted separately because the cost of the ambulance basically goes to paying the salaries for those 8 firefighters that are there. But that's enough from me. Chief Perro can take the floor with the rest of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. And so, pardon my back. I might get up and move around a little bit.
No worries.
I apologize. Excuse my
You got it.
Should have brought a clicker, but I didn't. So over the last 6 months, we've been conducting the study on the department. We looked at 4 different items, and of course the primary one was looking at the emergency medical system that the Gardner Fire Department currently has. But in addition, we overviewed the facility needs. So we looked at the 3 buildings that the department currently has. We looked at civil service pros and cons, because believe it or not, that ties into the ambulance service, trying to hire EMTs to work on that, the ambulance. And we reviewed the current staffing model. So what we did is we compared the Gardner Fire Department with 10 other departments in the Commonwealth. A few of them were like we did Leominster, and Leominster seems like, you know, it's too big of a department to compare with, but that was used in the Collins study. So we felt it was good to reuse the ones that they used in the Collins study. Hubbardston was also in the Collins study, but they never responded, and we couldn't get any information from them, so they're not included in that. So the methodology that we use, I conducted multiple site visits at the department. We visited all the buildings. I visited City Hall and got all my figures from the city auditor. We figured that was the best place to get them. I want to thank Chief LaGloy. I left him with a pretty long list of data that I needed, and he provided me with all that data. And as we moved along with the study, there were more requests, a lot over the phone, some by email, with both the chief and the city auditor. So we gathered the statistical department data and to determine current trending activity. So, you know, where the department has come since the Collins study back in 2000. I think it started in 2015, was completed in 2016. And then we reviewed and compared that data and how the Gardner Fire Department operates against national fire standards and emergency medical standards and best practices. So as the mayor mentioned, the Edward Collins study in 2015, there were 4 major points of the study. And one was that the department would operate a BLS system, and they would transport at least 75% of the patients in the city of Gardner. And that becomes important, because that allows for us to either make money or just try to break even. So we feel that a 75%, as you'll see as we go along, the 75% gives us the profit that the mayor was talking about. It also allowed for additional staffing. So what the model showed was they would hire 8 new firefighters, put 8 firefighters, 2 on each shift, that would work 24/7, 7 days a week, and would give us more boots on the ground. So that brought it up from 6 firefighters up to 8 firefighters. So that's substantial number of people. And again, we'd be able to do this all at no additional cost to the city. It would also provide additional services to residents, mainly because we have more people in the department that can provide more services for property owners and businesses, and again, with no tax increase. And when we get into the report, you'll actually see that it's generating quite a bit of money that is over and above the budgeted money needed to keep the ambulance running and to pay for the staffing for that ambulance. So this was the first piece, Gardner Fire Department with 75%, transporting 75% of the medical patients. This data was not being kept by either the fire department or the ambulance service, which is not unusual. It's just the way recording is. So it took us a little while. It actually took us quite a while to go through run by run and be able to, I think, put together 14 months of data to be able to get a good idea of what we were doing for transports. Since that time, Chief LaGloy has implemented a policy and a procedure to grab this information, so we'll have it whenever we need it if we want to compare it. So, and what it did show was, over that 14-month period, that Gardner Fire Department transported 76%, and Woods transported the remaining 24%. So we met that benchmark set by the Collins study. Additional staffing, the more boots on the ground. The average number of transports was 6 a day. So we're doing 6 transports a day. The average time they're tied up on a transport is an hour and 10 minutes. And this hour and 10 minutes, we looked at the run time, but we also kind of added a little cushion in there on the side of the hour and 10 minutes is actually a little bit longer than it takes. But what we did was use industry standards, which is 5 minutes for the response, 20 minutes on scene, and then 45 minutes to get to the hospital, get the patient in good emergency care, get back in the ambulance, get back to the station, sanitize the ambulance, get the ambulance back in service. So we're tied up an hour and 10 minutes. So time tied up on an average transport is 7 hours. So those 2 new firefighters we have on firefighter EMTs that we have on every shift are tied up approximately 7 hours a day. So what that gives us is 17 hours a day with 2 firefighters that prior to this system we didn't have. And I can tell you from 43 years in the fire service and 28 of those as chief of department, having an additional two personnel on a fire scene or emergency scene, or to go on multiple calls, if you get 2 at a time, really goes a long way. So these were the calls for the last 5 years. We did 5 years from FY18 to FY22, and again, that's why we were hoping to get this out in May or June, but we wanted to pull in FY22. And the city auditor was kind enough to get me those figures pretty quickly, so that was appreciated. So it shows the number of calls back in FY 18, 2278, up to this year we had 2858, and that's pretty much the trend. The trend is increasing. As our population gets older, and the baby boomers a large population. The ambulance calls tend to be rising, and they have been for the last 10 or 15 years. So you can see the number of calls and the number of transports. We typically transport about 80% of the calls that we go on. So you may go on a call, maybe an auto accident that you don't have to transport on. It may be a call that you go and the person really doesn't require medical aid. Maybe it was more of a police matter or something that you were able to handle there. The overall collections, $1,026,000 for last year. Collection expenses were $289,000 with a net income of $976,758. The next slide helps make things makes things a little bit easier and a lot more sense. So total collections after after paying the company that does the collections and some of the costs. So we had total collections, and then we have Medicare CPE. Now the Medicare CPE is a program that the state has initiated. It has to be applied for every year. And what that does is offsets the Medicare cost. Because the Medicare pays very little. When you bill, you're billing about 3 times more than what Medicaid's going to pay you or Medicare's going to pay you. So what ends up happening is the chief works on an application, and it goes by the number of calls you had, the number of Medicare patients you had, and the state has a figure, and they reimburse you with, it's kind of like a grant or aid that they give you under the Medicare CPE. So that's that helps. It helps a lot, actually. As you can see, last year, FY21, the chief was able to get $210,000, and in FY22 he was able to get $234,000. And I would assume this year, when he applies, I don't think it applied for September, somewhere around September. He'll apply. It's kind of like a year behind all the time. So hopefully that will continue to increase. Now the budget costs, the mayor had talked about, they separate the billing costs, they separate the costs for the firefighters, overtime, all the costs that the department has associated with the firefighters, repairs on the ambulances, fuel for the ambulances, equipment, everything that the ambulance requires, special software that it requires, is all in that budget cost. So this past year, our collections were just over $1 million. We received $234,000 from Medicare. The budget cost was $907,000, almost $908,000. And so it turned a revenue of $357,906. It's almost $358,000 turned back to the city this year. So that's commendable and probably remarkable. A lot of ambulance companies I see, they've been ambulance systems that fire departments use, they weren't really designed to, or even looked at to make money. They were just part of the job. It was when yes sir.
Yeah, are you taking questions? I don't want to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
That $357,900, the or a significant share of it is that reimbursement from Medicare reimbursement, almost $234,500
Yep.
in round numbers. That program is subject to renewal and appropriation, I assume, from the state.
Correct.
So if in the first 3 years we didn't have it available, or we didn't apply for it, or whatever it was, the numbers were significantly different, or significantly lower. So I'm just wondering to what extent we want to rely on that reimbursement program.
Well, if you lost that reimbursement, you'd probably still be making the same amount of money.
About a third as much, yeah.
Yeah, you made in FY19, it was about $128,000. The thing you have to remember is on top of that revenue that you're making, you have 8 additional firefighters going
Yes.
out the door.
Yeah, the other question, did you look at all about the amount billed versus the yield from the amount billed? I know this is the amount recovered as a percentage of the amount billed. In other words, that amount that goes to collection.
Yeah.
And what yield they have from what they're provided. We know what they got paid, but we don't know how much didn't get paid.
Yeah, we did. We have some on, there's some in the report. The collections beyond, well, you've had a medical bill from your dentist to your doctor. And the doctor bills $250 for the visit and $100 for whatever they did. The insurance company, pays $150 for the visit and $50 for the cost. And that's where that big uncollected funds come from. So typical ambulance billing is, and I think you correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, I think you're about 3 times, or 2.5 times over Medicare, what Medicare allowed. And the norm is 3 times over Medicare.
I think we're 2.5.
Yeah, and so what the reasoning behind that is to bill high, and then the insurance companies are going to give you whatever rate they have. Now, Blue Cross and Blue Shield will have a different return rate than other insurance companies. Motor vehicle accidents, when you're dealing with auto insurance companies, they actually, if they pay you, and if the person has insurance, it's typically on the higher end.
You get the full amount.
Yeah.
Or you.
So that's where all that goes. We talked a little bit about writing off, carrying all that uncollected money. I mean, that's something the city needs to look at. You can't just keep carrying that money that you're never going to collect, because you're never going to collect it. I know the chief uses, after they use Coastal to do the initial billing, they use another company
For collections,
to
yeah.
do the collections.
Right.
And so once that company collections, the money's not made or collected, that's pretty much, the truth of the matter. I'm just trying to be as honest.
Well,
as
I just
can.
didn't see any numbers that we had collections, but we
Yeah.
didn't have what uncollected amounts
Yeah, and again, the uncollected amount is 90% is just what the insurance companies are not gonna pay you. They're set to pay you X amount of dollars, just like they do when they pay your medical doctor or the dentist. I noticed the biggest in the dentist, you know, they charge $400 for filling and they pay them $125 or whatever. So that's most of that uncollected money. I mean, there's bad debt out there where you're not collecting from the person at all. But typically, the majority of that money is money that you're never going to collect because unless you go after the person after the insurance. And
I understand.
typically, we accept what the insurance pays,
Okay,
and you're not going to go after the person down the street for the other.
thank you.
You know. Thank you for the question.
Chief, if I could just add to go off of Councilor Walsh's comments. So yes, we didn't start getting the Medicare CPE until fiscal '21. That's when we had a change in administration in both the fire department and the city, where we realized that we could start applying for that. It just wasn't applied for before, so that's why those are the zero amount there. And I do just want to point out that in FY22, the letter we got from the Medicare CPE did make a note that it was slightly inflated this year as a way to pay back some extra costs that we would have gotten for the COVID-19 pandemic in the year. So that's why that 234 is a little higher than normal too, is that the state did acknowledge in the letter that they received to us that they bumped up the formula to help cover some of the city's costs for the COVID-19 pandemic that were associated with those ambulance costs. Thank you.
Thank you, man. So one thing that's not in the budget and I'll go to my recommendations in a minute, but is to plan on putting money aside for a new ambulance. So right now, the fire department has two ambulances. They have Rescue 3, which is the frontline ambulance, and they have Rescue 2, which is the backup ambulance. So say Rescue 3 needs to go out and get tires, an oil change, or has a problem mechanically, they'll take Rescue 2 and put that in service so they don't lose any time on the ground that would affect the 75% of the transport. So the ambulance typically, and what's running with the calls that Gardner does and the history that Gardner has, the ambulance needs to be replaced every 5 years. So what you do is you replace the frontline ambulance every 5 years, and then that frontline ambulance goes into the reserve ambulance for the next 5 years. So you typically you're going to get 10 years out of an ambulance, basically. 5 years frontline and 5 years reserve. So, but in a capital plan, I'm not sure the logistics on it. You need to put money aside X amount of dollars per year. So this year's ambulance has already been audited. It will be come in 2023, and it was funded through a grant, I believe, COVID money. Yeah, with COVID money. So there's no cost for an ambulance this year, which is nice. So you buy another 5 years. But moving forward from 2023, it would be nice to have some type of capital money. I don't know if that goes against practice here in the city, but that would be my recommendation.
Excuse me, Chief. Mayor Nicholson, can you speak to the capital?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam President. Just the ambulance that we purchased through the American Rescue Plan funding that we received, it was a $650,000 new ambulance. I do plan on submitting a full report of all of our American Rescue funding that we've done to date, as well as what we still have in balance, after a couple of expenditures that I've notified the council about. So that is done now. The city does have a vehicle stabilization account that when free cash is available, we can start to build up a fund to purchase new vehicles that way. The plan is, after reading this report, to start putting a little bit a year into that fund, with the tower being our next big purchase that we're planning for, because we expect that to come in anywhere between $1.5 to $2 million for a new tower truck within the next 5 to 10 years. So that's our next big truck purchase that we're planning for, but we do plan to start planning for these because we are required by state law to do a capital improvement plan with a funding plan associated with it for the council to vote on every November. So that'll be submitted this year as well. Thank you.
So the fourth piece was additional services to the residents and property owners and businesses with no increase in taxes. And again, we look back on the additional 2 firefighters per day, firefighter EMTs, the dual role firefighter EMT, and a dual role we understand it in the fire service, but the dual role firefighter EMT is a nice commodity to have. On one hand, he can go out and fight fires and do that emergency type work, hazardous material work. And then on the other hand, he can jump in the back of the, or she can jump in the back of the ambulance and do the emergency medical technician work. So it's like a dual purpose firefighter EMT, which has become more prevalent over the recent years as we move more heavily into the emergency medical field, which is, which is a good percentage of our calls. Approximately 25% increase in response capabilities to these other emergencies. So that's the additional 2 per shift. We're going to lose them for 7 hours, so it gives us about a 25% increase of personnel each and every day, which is, and at no cost, and actually generating some money. Additionally, the positive revenue source for the city and provides revenue to offset other fire department costs. So our recommendations to stay with the hybrid system, having Gardner Fire Department provide the primary BLS and Woods or some other private to provide both backup and ALS services. Now, with Woods running out of headquarters, I mean, to me, that's a perfect condition, because if we need the 2 extra firefighters to go out on a fire call, we have 2 ambulances sitting there. One may end up going to the fire call, but we'll still have an ambulance sitting there. If the Gardner Fire Ambulance is tied up at the hospital, we have another ambulance still waiting to serve the people in the community with the limited response time. And then they run the ALS piece, which is a whole nother level of training for the EMTs, whole nother level of recertification, we'll get into this a little bit, but trying to hire new firefighter paramedics is even more difficult than trying to hire firefighter EMTs. So having Woods provide the service that they provide for the backup and ALS service, I think is very unique, and it works very well in the city of Gardner. It may not work well somewhere else, but it seems to work very good here. Gardner Fire should apply for those offset revenues from Medicare. They should continue to keep 2 ambulances available for service like we talked about, the primary ambulance and the backup ambulance. They should budget for capital expense to buy a new ambulance every 5 years, and keep an eye on the ratio of transports. Because if all of a sudden we're starting to do a lot more fire calls and our number of transports drop below 75%, our revenues are going to drop accordingly. So we have to look, and that would be that would show that something else is happening in the city that we might need to look at. So that's the emergency medical system. Are there any questions? The second item we looked at was, and I'll go a little quicker through this because I know the first piece was the important piece. The Gardner Fire Department facilities. We have the old fire station on East Broadway and Prospect Street, which was built in 1935. That's where they had the little oil issue over. That was my first day here. I'm watching them dig up the floor down at Station 1. Station 2 was built in 1978. It's at 70 City Hall Avenue, serves as fire headquarters. First day I walked in there was water pouring through the roof on the inside of the garage doors from a problem with the roof that we'll get into. And then they have that annex building, which is located right next to it. I don't know if it was a coffee shop or whatever.
Cumberland Farms.
What was it?
Cumberland Farms.
Cumberland Farms. Thank you. So there were 10 major areas of interest, and they're pictured in the study. The roof leak at headquarters that we talked about, lack of storage space for fire apparatus and trailers. If you walk in there, walk to the headquarters, there's 3 trailers parked outside, and you can barely get around the equipment inside the station. So they're maxed out. Of course, have 2 Woods fire ambulances in there. So it's pretty maxed out in there right now. There's been no consideration for mixed gender use of the facilities. When the building was built in '78, you know, it was pretty much male-dominated fire department. There's 1 bathroom. There's a gang shower. Gang shower is just, you know, there's I don't know, 3 or 4 shower heads in the room. So it's that's pretty much it's for male and female. I mean, you can put locks on the door and everything else, but you know, at some point it needs to be updated. And the sleeping area, there's 2 dorm areas, 1 on each side, and they're dorms. They do have curtains that pull across in front of them, but moving forward and into the future, maybe something should be done with that. Lack of adequate lockers and storage, proper ventilation for turnout gear. The turnout gear, when the firefighters go out to a call, whether it's a hazardous material call or a fire, they bring their gear back, and even if when they wash it, it's still off gases. So it traps the chemicals inside the turnout gear itself, and those are constantly off gassing. So currently, if you look at the newer stations, what they do is they have the turnout gear, and that room is separately ventilated. So that air from there goes to the outside. It's not going back into the living quarters at the station. There's no dedicated decontamination area for the fire and EMS equipment. That should have its own room, especially, you know, with all the pathogens and stuff we're dealing with EMS, and being able to gross decon the gear. If you've ever seen somebody come out of a fire that's just pulled the ceiling down on them and it had all blown in insulation, you know, it needs to be decon before you can even put it in the washing machine. There's an absence of adequate storage space at headquarters. Apparatus, equipment, and gear are stored between the 3 buildings. So even though we're crammed at headquarters, there's still apparatus. There's the reserve ambulance is stored over at the annex building, and then there's an engine and some other support equipment and trailers down at the old Station 1. And then office space is very limited and does not meet the current needs of the department. You know, back when the department was built, you know, fire prevention wasn't a big thing. EMS wasn't a big thing. I mean, the records and stuff that goes along with just keeping track of the EMS requires someone to do that, a desk to sit at. Mechanical work requires, you know, record storage and everything else, and it just, the station right now is bursting at the seams. And then a lack of a training facility. I mean, that's kind of a nice thing to have. You can train on, if you have 9 firefighters working in the day, and they can go out into the side lot or whatever and train, that's ideal. We're not sending them to the fire academy. They're staying in town. They can do it on duty, and you need to train. Every day is a training day. So the recommendations, it's just short and sweet. The city should investigate the needs for newer, substantially remodeled fire headquarters to meet future needs. Any questions? Civil service, and this is off the website. Civil service as a government agency was designed to provide fairness in the public sector. In entry-level hiring, promotions including bypass and rank, demotions, layoff, and discipline, which includes suspensions of termination. In recent years, including the Gardner Police Department, a lot of cities and towns across the Commonwealth have left civil service. Police have been leaving in droves, and fire departments are starting to leave for various reasons. Now, I started in the fire service from the civil service, and it did me well. It promoted me up nice and quick. But when I took my fire exam in 1974, there were over 30,000 people took the exam. There were less than 1,000, I think, that took the last one. So, and police is no different. So it's a sector that we're having a little bit of difficult pulling in employees. Not only Gardner's having problems hiring firefighters, there's communities across the Commonwealth are. So the pros and cons to any system. The pros, civil service testing is independent of the city of town and requires really little effort. You just say they have a statewide exam for entry, and if you need a promotional exam, you write to civil service, send them an email, and they'll put you on the list for their promotional exam. Civil service also offers various levels of protection to union members. They view civil service system as providing an even playing field, which can help keep local politics and favoritism to a minimum. So that's something that really has to be kept in mind when you're considering staying or leaving with civil service. And the cost to the cities and towns is kept to a minimum. Promotional exams are paid by the firefighters themselves. Entrance exams, same thing. So there's very little cost to the town. So if you were to do your own exam system, which you'll find out with the police, sometimes you can do it yourself. Most people hire private companies to come in, and of course there's a cost with that. So the cons, new hire and promotion tests are based on statewide questions and not unique to the specific community. So in a promotional exam, you may have, for a lieutenant or captain, you may have a question on manhole explosion. Now, I've been in the fire service 43 years, including the city of Haverhill, and I've never had a manhole explosion. But the city of Austin does, and the city of Worcester does, I'm sure. So, again, it's not community specific. So if you were to leave civil service and have your own written promotional exams, if that's the way you were to go, you could make those exams more community specific. Emergency medical technicians off the civil service list, which is the new hire list, is exhausted very quickly. I know the chief has tried to hire, I believe, 4 firefighters. In the last set of hiring, was only able to hire 2. And then he just tried again, since the report was written, to hire 4 again? 3. And was only able to hire 2.
Actually, we did end up hiring.
Yeah, end up got 3. So so he was able to get 3, but you were right on top of it after the exam come out, so that was good. If you go to hire now, probably, into the fall, you'd have to wait till the next exam cycle, probably to hire another EMT. In transfers, so transfers that want to come to Gardner have to come from the civil service department. So you couldn't have a firefighter, say, over in Ashburnham that's not civil service, say, I'd like to be a Gardner firefighter, and come over here because they're not civil service. Where a Gardner firefighter could go over to Ashburnham without having to do anything. So that's another disadvantage to civil service if you're taking, trying to get transfers in. And then hiring out of the 2N+1 limits candidates. So when you call to hire 1 or promote 1 person, civil service sends you a list of 3 unless they're tied. So you have to pick from the top 3 candidates. Where if you were out of civil service, you could make the testing just a pass or fail. They pass the test, and then the rest is done on how they perform in the department, interviews or what have you. Or you could say, well, we're going to interview, the top 5 or the top 10. So you're not being limited to just looking at 3 candidates. And again, that's not only for promotions, that's for new hires also. So if the chief wants to hire 1 person off the list, they'll give them a bigger list now, but usually you have to pick from the top 3, which may not be the best candidates, especially on an entry exam. Promotions are a little different. So the recommendation, review the success of the upcoming hiring process, see if you're able to get enough firefighters, EMTs. If it does not meet these needs, then you're going to have to look at if civil service is still working for you. But I think no matter if you stay with civil service, you leave civil service, the fire department needs to proactively recruit people. So you need to go out to the schools, you need to do career days, you need to go to Massasoit Community College. Try to get those people, especially the ones in the town, to take the civil service exam. Announce when the civil service exam is out. Using, social media, Twitter. That's what all the people that we're looking at that are coming in at entry level, 20, 24 years old, that's how they get their information. They're not reading newspapers. So if you put an ad in the newspaper, a 20-year-old isn't picking up that newspaper. So to look into finding some unique ways using social media to get candidates to want to be Gardner firefighters and take that civil service exam. EMTs, I know when I was in Chelmsford, we would bring in, they had a program, would bring them in for a day, just for a day to be, see what the fire department did, but they had for a whole semester, they could sign up and we would have them for 2 hours a day to kind of shadow the firefighters. They'd put them in gear, they'd run them through some of the exercises. They also did it up at the dispatch center for people that might be interested in being public safety dispatchers. So just to get them into the mindset, and it's funny, I can't say, we had 100%, but I would like to say we had 3 or 4 people that we did hire that did that mentoring, that program that we had with the high school. So that was, went and took the civil service exam. A couple of the people went up to New Hampshire because they didn't have to deal with the civil service problem. I got a few of them are up in Nashua right now. So that's where, those are my recommendations for civil service. I wouldn't jump out of it. If it's not working for you, you need to look at it. But I think in either case, whether you stay in civil service or you leave civil service, you need to proactively try to find firefighter EMTs.
Excuse me, Chief. Mind if I ask a question? Is that okay?
If it's all right with the council.
Yeah.
Okay. Since we're talking hiring, did we look into why we've had to hire so many new firefighters over the course of the last 7 years?
We really didn't. We were looking at civil service and we looked at a staffing model, so we didn't do that type of study.
Okay, because we've lost 19 firefighters since 2016.
Yeah.
So we've been trying to hire as much as we've been losing. So it might be worth looking into why we can't retain firefighters in this department, because we've been getting young firefighters on, but they leave just as soon as they come on. Something we might, as a city, want to address. Look at the reason why we're lacking firefighters, and are we marketable or are we not marketable?
And some of the problem goes back to, you can get on the civil service department, once you're there a year, that department sends you through the fire academy, and once you're there a year, you become a pretty good commodity. For firefighter 1 and 2, you're fire academy certified, your civil service, you can pretty much go to any fire department you want in the state. And that's what a lot of people do. They'll come because the list gets, there's other reasons, but sometimes the list gets so low, you're hiring people from, down on the South Shore, they come up here, they get an apartment, they stay here for a year, and then they go to a department that's closer to them. Because again, as we were talking, to get people to transfer into the department, they're already trained, they're EMTs. It's a good deal for the department getting them, not such a good deal for the department leaving them, but a good point made. We looked at the current staffing model, and successful fire departments share these 4 things: chain of command hierarchy from the lowest to the highest department level, ensuring that the subordinates report to one supervisor. Supervisory limits or span of control, and that's the number of individuals that, or resources that report to one supervisor. And as an emergency scene gets more difficult or more dangerous, that span of control actually shrinks. So if you come up to you have a span of control of 1 to 5, one supervisor to 5 firefighters. If you have a real bad incident, it's difficult for that one supervisor to even supervise those 5. Then divisional labor responsibilities are assigned to prevent duplication of effort. and discipline and regulations. Written policies, procedures, guidelines, help set the boundaries and enforce what is expected of each individual in the department. It's very difficult to be a firefighter if you have no idea what you're supposed to do. So that's very important. So we looked at 10 departments other than Gardner. They're in the appendix in the back of the report. And those were the 10 we looked at. There's 11 on there because Gardner's on there also. And it's a good mix from across the Commonwealth. So we looked at all these departments and we noticed two compelling things. And one was the lack of a deputy chief, the number 2 person in charge. And then the standard span of control for the fire department, which should be 5 to 6 at the most. That means 5 to 6 firefighters to 1 supervisor is exceeded on each group. There's 1 lieutenant overseeing 8 firefighters on the group. So that span of control before you go out the door is already exceeded. So what we would recommend is to add a deputy chief. He would serve as second in command, would manage day-to-day operations. So the 4 different groups would report to the deputy chief, and he'd direct and coordinate those activities. So that gives the fire chief time to worry about the budget, moving the department forward, addressing current policies and procedures, and again, just moving the department forward as opposed to dealing with the day-to-day stuff, which just keeps you day-to-day and keeps you in the same spot. You could act as the department head if the fire chief was out or gone, and assist in succession planning. So when you're looking for your next fire chief, you have somebody that's been in the number 2 spot that's been doing, again, the next bullet, both administrative and time spent in the field. And that's time spent in the field dealing with day-to-day, but he'd also have an administrative piece that he'd have to do. We would recommend it's a non-union position, and he'd be able to serve as a confidential employee. Right now, the chief has no confidential employee. Confidential employee is important. He can assist and act in the confidential capacity when formulating, determining, and effectuating management policies and dealing with disciplinary issues. When you're the chief and you're the only non-union member of the department, you're making decisions by yourself. It's nice to have another set of ears and another person that can help you look at everything a little bit more objectively. So that would be our recommendation for the deputy chief. The span of control, the group span of control at Gardner Fire Department is 8 firefighters to 1 supervisor. Again, exceeding the 5 to 6 to 1 supervisor model. Again, the span of control becomes more apparent and potentially more dangerous during emergency operations, and maintaining a manageable span of control is particularly important at incidents where safety and accountability is a top priority. So to bring the span of control under where it should be, we would recommend creating a captain's position on each group. This position would come out of the current 9 positions on the group. So you wouldn't be adding 4 new captains, you'd be making 4 new captains. So it would be, basically it's the difference between a firefighter's pay and a captain's pay as far as cost goes. We'd be keeping the current lieutenant's position. The fire captain would manage the group and run day-to-day operations on that group. The fire lieutenant would act in the supervisory foreman type position and assist the captain in day-to-day operations. And this would bring the span of control to 4 firefighters to 1 supervisor. And as we can see, the model would look like this. The captain would be in charge of the lieutenant, 3 firefighters, those are his 4. And then the lieutenant would be in charge of 4 of the firefighters. So that would help with your Span of control, it also gives you 2 offices in case you had multiple calls, which I'm sure the city has many multiple calls that they have to go on, and you'd have a trained fire officer on the multiple calls. So some things you hear about all the time, 2 in, 2 out. I don't know if you've heard those. It's an OSHA 29 CFR 1910-134 law that requires anytime firefighters enter a dangerous atmosphere, we'll leave it at that, they need to have 2 people outside to be in direct communications with them and to be able to rescue them if something happens to them. So fortunately, the Gardner Fire Department does meet those needs for the 2 in, 2 out. And again, that's very important, and I'm happy to say they meet those. You can see it on the chart how it requires those 2 firefighters are going to go in. These 2 firefighters are there as a rescue team and keeping track of them, actually watching where they are in direct communications with them all the time. Now you'll also probably hear of NFPA 1710, which addresses structure fires and operations at a structure fire for career department, which Gardner Fire Department falls under. So you can see under this model, the minimum firefighters you should have at a fire are 15. And this is based on actual modeling that was done, which again, NFPA 17 is a standard. It's not a law, it's not a regulation like the 2 in and 2 out law is. But this is 1710 is something we should always be trying to move towards to meet those needs, to make the fire ground safety and to make the fire department much more efficiently. So again, NFPA 1710 is a standard for best practices. Gardner should work towards implementing 1710 in the years to come, and you can do it by, the easiest way to add personnel, but it's not, it's very costly. So automatic mutual aid can help with neighboring communities. Pre-fire plans can help to get you to that point. But I look back probably in the early 80s when NFPA 1500, which is a health and safety standard that they put out, and I said, there's no way in a million years, as a captain, I think at the time, I said, there's no way in a million years we'll ever get anywhere near this. And of course, 1980, it's quite a few years since 1980, and not all departments have met the NFPA 1500, but we're a lot closer. So it gives you, the standard gives you something to look at, something that's out there that's best practices, that I think every department and every city and every town should be trying to work towards and moving forward. So it's just something to be on the radar. So our recommendations, and this is the second to last slide, the city should look at making a non-union confidential deputy chief's position. The deputy would serve as second in command of the fire department. The city looks at creating a captain's position on each group to be the group commander. This would be within the current group staffing of 9, and in addition to the current group lieutenant to bring the span of control to 4 to 1. And the Gardner Fire Department should work towards meeting the guidelines of NFPA 1710 over time. And that's the end of the presentation. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the city councilors?
Okay, thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you for what you do. Thank you for your service, for putting your life on the line every day. And I myself appreciate everything you do. Thank you, everyone. Thank the mayor, thank the city, thank the chief and the city auditor for all the help they did getting it to be able to put this audit together. So,
Councilor Walsh?
I want to just to compliment the consultant for the great work that he's done, the thoroughness of the report, the exhaustive effort in collecting data and interpreting the data and reporting it in a way that's meaningful and helpful to understand the current status and where we might look to make improvements in the future. Thank you.
thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chief Farrell, for coming here this evening. Thank you for the presentation. You got it.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Mayor Nicholson. Thank you, Chief
Thank you, Chief.
LaJoy.
Thank you, ladies, thank you for what you do. Well, I'm thankless, Joe.
We will close this part of the meeting and reconvene at 7:30 in about 5 minutes for our regular meeting.